This is taking you a little bit further still and talking about inversions that we talked about last week. I'm just going to take these out. Now, at the top here, you can see we're in C major, and we did a little bit of this last week with Monte Cristi, if you remember, and some of you said, oh, it feels like a bit of a leap forward, which it was. Here we've got our capital primary triads. Now, the reason they're called primary triads is because they are all major triads. The other notes, so chord 2, which will be based on D, and obviously we've got no sharps or flats, so D, miss 1, F, miss 1, A is chord 2. Chord 3 would be based on the third note, 1, 2, 3. E, miss 1, G, miss 1, B. Chord 6, A, C, E, and chord 7, B, D, F. They are all minor chords within a major scale. So here is 1, 4, and 5. Here's chord 2. Here's chord 3. Here's chord 6. And here's chord 7. Now this isn't mine. Does anybody know what this is? If you get this, you're amazing.
It'll be augmented something.
No, it's the other way.
Diminished.
Damn.
Diminished. Well
7.
done. So, yeah, it's the only one that's diminished. Diminished chords are often used in horror movies. And they've got a sort of spooky feel to them. But chord 7 is very like one of the primary triads. B, D, and F. It's very like 5-7 chord. So here's chord 5-7. We talked about that because I remember talking about barbershop with you, did I? Or have I made that up? Yeah. If you take the G off the bottom, that's a diminished chord. Now that 7th must fall, the leading note, the B. So it's got 2 notes in it that have to function in a certain way. The 7th has to fall, the leading note has to rise, and then that sort of takes you to chord 1. The B has to rise to a C, the F has to fall to an E. You can hear that. But there's another chord that's not a primary triad, it's a secondary triad that's got C and E in it. What are they, please?
6.
Chord 6. And 5 to 6, or something to 6, but normally 5 to 6 is an unfinished cadence. Anybody know what this is, please? You feel it, it's not finished, is it?
Imperfect?
It isn't imperfect, it's the other one.
The other one.
Interrupted is chord 5 or something, normally 5 to chord 6. So there you go, chord 5 to 6. Anyway, so we were looking at the inversions, and this look is C in the bass, root in the bass, and an E and G. So it's chord 1 in first inversion. So let's pop that in. Now the next one is chord 1, but now the E is in the bass. All cows eat. So that is 1,
B.
B. And the final one, C, E, and the G this time is in the bass. So it's a chord 1,
C.
Excellent. It's just a recap of last week. This is your 5-7, your dominant 7th chord, because it's got play 1, miss 1, play 1, miss 1, play 1, miss 1, play 1. So it's got an extra miss 1, play 1 on the top. You can go on forever. You can, well, when I say forever, people don't go on forever, but you can have 9ths, 11ths, 13ths, and you just keep adding another miss 1, play 1 on the top. So there's a 7. Miss 1, play 1, 9, miss 1, play 1, 11, miss 1, play 1, 13. You find a lot of that going on in Debussy and the Impressionists, where you get these like really rich chords with loads of extra added notes in it. But for now,
till you run out of fingers.
Till you run out of fingers. And it just gives you shimmer to the sound, as opposed to, it's what's called non-functional harmony, because it doesn't, that doesn't fall and that doesn't rise. It doesn't function like normal harmony. So this is our chord 5/7 there. In the Baroque period, when Bach was writing his church music, he had so much music that he needed to write. Every week it had to be new music. Every Sunday had a different biblical requirement, or a service was required. And obviously at that time there were no printing presses. They did sometimes hire people to write out and scribe music for them, but every part written, whether it be for organ, cello, vocal parts, all had to be handwritten. And you can imagine that was a huge amount of work, especially when you've got services and things to prepare all the time. So they created a shorthand which is called figured bass. And it's basically like shorthand, writing in shorthand, but you write in music. So what would have happened was that they would have written out the vocal parts for the singers to sing. And then they would have given the organist this. That's the bass line, nothing else. So all the right hand would be completely blank. Sometimes they would write in a sketch of an idea, or maybe sometimes what the soprano line was singing, the treble line was singing. But quite often they would get nothing other than a bass line. So what they came up with was this quite a simple way of writing out numbers that told you what the chord is above it. What it didn't do, whereas these give you their function, so we know that a 5 or a dominant 7th will always be followed by 1 or 6. We've just talked about that. These are weaker chords, and we need these if we're going to cadence, because we'll definitely know what key we're in. This system just tells you what notes are piled above. So none of the intricacies of what these mean have to be understood. You just count the numbers. It's the interval between the root and the other numbers in the chord. So for example, we've got a C, there's number 1. The next note is an E, 1, 2, 3. And then a C, we count up then to the G, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this would have been known as a 5/3 chord, and it would be written like that. Let's do the same with the next one. We've got the E at the bottom now. So let's do E to G first. So 1, 2, 3. The bottom number is going to be 3. The top number is E up to C. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's a 6/3. The next one, we've got a G at the bottom now. So G, we're going to count to the first note in the chord, which is a C. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then G to E is the other note. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's a 6/4. The next one, because it's got 3 notes and it has 4 notes and it's got 3 notes, because you always count from the bottom note. So G to B is 3. G to D is 5. And G to F is 7. So that's your shorthand. What they tended to do was, if it was root position, they just didn't bother. Because if I see a C, I play the chord of C. It wasn't really difficult to think about. So if I see C, I play the chord of C. This one, they abbreviated that to just the number 6, and you can see loads of those here, look. So they're just all first inversion. The 6/4, they did keep it the same, because if they missed the 4 off, you might get confused with the first inversion. So a 6/4 kept that. And just like we lost the 5 and the 3 there, because it's in root position, what you tend to see is just a number 7 underneath the dominant 7th chord, or a chord of the 7th. So it's the intervals above the bass note. You'll never ever have to use these. You'll never ever have to really understand what they mean. You'll probably never see it unless we do something like Hallelujah Chorus, and we're singing off proper full scores with orchestral on. You probably would see the continuo there, which is what this is. So you'd see figured bass creeping in there. So it's music from the early music and Baroque music that, if it was accompanied, would have this figured bass. So if you look at the bottom, I know that that's an A. It's got nothing underneath it, so it's the chord of A. That's a G, so that's the second one up. So I think down 1 and up 1, so I know that's the chord of E major in first inversion. There's a chord in root position, so it's an F sharp chord. There's an A, same, so that would be an F sharp and a C, so that's an F sharp in first, and so on and so forth. Here we've got a 7, so that's a 7th chord. That would be G sharp, B, D, and F. This one here, that's an interesting one. The 6th above that note would be flattened. So F, G, A, B, C, D. When you played the D, you'd play it as a D flat. So when I was at university, we used to spend hours learning exercises to help us read these quickly. So for example, one I can remember is 5, 7, B1, etc. And we would just sit and play these exercises that so that when we read it, it would just fall under our fingers. So that's where it gets its 6/4 from. The second inversion, something C, is called a 6/4 for that reason. So here, 1C is C, E, G, we've got the G in the bass. Now a 1C 5/1, because it's a weak chord, it gives us this really simple bass. 1C 5/1, 1C 5/1. I'm sure you'll have all heard that cadence before. So it's what we call an approach chord, because that chord takes you to the cadence, approaches the cadence from a really nice way. Why? Well, because the bass line is the same note, so they haven't got to think about pitching. Now, you think back to the reason that figured bass arrived. It arrived because Bach had to write so much music that it had to be singable, because they were sight reading. So lots of these things are bought out, you know, like anything, through necessity. So the 1C 5/1, it is a second inversion chord, and the reason that it works so nicely is because it's the same note and then falls to give you your final perfect cadence. So let me just play that again. There's 1C, that stays put to 5, and then chord break. You'll have heard that millions of times, I'm sure. Now the next one is a passing 6/4. And what we see is the bass line moving, look, yet again, because of having to sight read the stuff and because of having to support the weaker chord, the C, it just moves, look, in scalic motion. It moves up the scale. And I've seen them the other way around as well, 1B, 5C1. And again, you'll just hear that, you'll hear the ease of the bass. And also think about the fact that 1, 5C, 1B. And here it is the other way around, 1B, 5C1. 1B, 5C, 1. It gives, again, this lovely fluid bass. And this second inversion, which can only be used in very specific circumstances, we see beautifully sandwiched or beautifully approaching a solid triads. There's a lot to take in there, I realise that.
Just about.
But what the thing is, we've talked about this before, having this basic understanding of the harmony is in itself, so what? It's pretty pointless. Are we ever going to use this in choir? Probably not. But when we start to look at modulation, which we cannot do unless we have the rudiments understanding, then we're not going to get modulation. And modulation opens up an understanding on a whole greater level. If you can see and understand how a piece moves from one key to another, when we then do that, you will be better in tune. You will also it will open up a greater understanding of the structure of the music and where you should pace your movement through the piece as a singer. So this, you're never going to write it. You might sit, if you're listening to the baritones who are taking 19 years to learn 4 bars, you might sit and think, well, have a look at what happened in the harmony now, and have a little look. That's about as far as it's going to go. You're not going to use it for any other reason, I wouldn't have thought, unless you get really into it. But this is a means to a much more important end, and that's where we're going with this. Here we are at Monte Cristi. We're in A major. And the final cadence is called 1C, A, C sharp and E. There's your E in the bass, look. So that's called 1C, 5, but the 7 comes there and then 1. So let me play that to you. There's chord 1C. Here's 5. Now there's the 7. And there's chord 1. So we see there that lovely cadential 6/4 at the end of that phrase. So it is useful to know these things. You know, tenor 2s, baritones, quite often will be singing these placed falling 7ths. Let me see, there's one, I'm sure the tenor 2s do. Yeah, there. All my pride. Tenor 2s. So the tenor 2s have got that falling 7th. It's just nice to know things like that so that you can make that little bit more of it. Oh yes, I remember that. That's a falling 7th then. So there you go. 1C, 5, falling 7, chord 1. Brill.